Good afternoon, everyone. I insist on saying good afternoon because it is before 5 p.m. on a Friday, even though you can see behind me that I should probably be saying good evening instead. But that's the reality of living in Seattle during daylight savings time. So, what I'm doing right now is I've just found out some things. I just watched a seminar yesterday that answered a lot of my questions about COVID for myself. And I wanted to pass those on to you because I think that it's a perspective that comes from one of my most admired scientists that I've been following since the very beginning of this pandemic. And yet I don't feel like the word's out. So I'm going to make a video. This video is mostly going to be based on the other scientists' words, but I'd like to give credit where credit's due, and I'd like you to know it because I think this is important science for everyone to know. The basic question that we're asking here is, why is this disease so different for the young versus the old when it comes to COVID-19? And so I have three questions, and I want to run through these really quickly, leaving it open for questions that I will respond to some other way if I can. Where are we right now for COVID-19? And why do older people get so much sicker? The seminar from Dr. Shane Crotty answered this question for me in a way that brought everything together, and I want you to know what it is. This includes several people are asking, should I get a booster? The answer to that is, how old are you? Because that affects the equation more than anything else. Then a third question is COVID-19 a generational disease? I'll explain what I mean by that when I get to it, but it has to do with age. Are the kids who are getting vaccinated now going to remember this COVID-19 and mount a response against it in the years to come? Because of the tone of my voice, you might expect that I actually have an optimistic answer to that question. That is yes, and I'm, again, passing on what Dr. Crotty said. But I'd like to get to that to explain his reasoning, which I agree as summing up the data that I have seen out of his lab and others as well. But before we get to that, let's talk about the present before we talk about the future. Because there are some outbreaks going on right now, but for the picture for the U.S. actually looks okay. Where are we right now in cases compared to a year ago? These are my favorite drop-down graphs. Down is good, up is bad, and you can see right now for the U.S. on the pink line, we are the definition of flat. But we're also more than half below the peak of where we were before last December. And so I want you to look at this and, glass half full or glass half empty. But when the glass is full of virus, I think that half empty is actually, a very good place to be. This is not spiking, and I highlighted exactly 1 year ago today where we have the cases were higher then, about double what they were today, and they were shooting up. Whereas right now, they're not shooting up at all. Now this is for the whole nation, and in some places they are going up a bit, but those appear to be regional outbreaks rather than a systemic winter wave. And they do not correlate with what I've seen with the winter states, at least in any huge way. Maybe there's a slight effect for winter, but it looks like right now we're doing okay. The hospitalizations less cases, we have three streams of data that I've talked about before. Hospitalizations look like this right now. This is straight from the CDC. And you can see that hospitalizations are still going down. They're flatter than they used to be for the whole nation. But, they're not spiking up. And if anything, they're going down. So the hospitalizations tell the same story as the cases. And of course, deaths lag the other two. These might flatten out, but these aren't even flattening yet. These are just going down. You can see, there's noise in the data, but it's going down. And actually, deaths are about where they were a year ago. But remember, because they're lagged, this is actually still good news and consistent with all the other data. So, if anything, we're still seeing some cases, but we are not seeing hospitalizations and deaths, anything like what we saw last November so far, last Veterans Day. King County, Washington, how's it look for my home county? Here I have the positive cases and hospitalized cases, and the thing is, as computer people will do, they change the website. But now I can overlay, because I have the old data, I can overlay the new data on the old. The website doesn't go back farther than this summer. And so I can overlay it, and I scaled it to it so you can see cases have gone up recently, but not as high up as they were before. Hospitalizations actually went up just about to the level that they were this summer, not this past winter, in the most recent, the sort of autumn spike that we had. I don't even want to call it a spike, but this is basically Delta going through and wreaking havoc in the way that it will do for our county as well. But it looks like vaccination has built a wall. Not as much against cases. It does reduce your chance of getting a case, but more than that, and more importantly than that, it reduces your chance of getting hospitalized significantly. So my local campus at Seattle Pacific, we actually have, when we opened up, and we have a vaccination mandate for the campus itself. We have September and October, we had about 3 to 4 cases a week, and it's dropped off in November. We're 2 weeks into November, we've had 2 cases. Only one of them has been a student. So we have 1 case a week among students and staff at the same time. That's improvement. And so the rest of the questions, I want to give you the answer of Dr. Shane Crotty, and I want to say this is a seminar, and I want to put this forward. Dr. Crotty was the first one who really showed in the lab that the T-cell branch of immunity, the branch of immunity that I've studied myself, involves good responses to COVID-19, good responses to holding off the SARS-CoV-2 virus. And this is one of his first papers. I've actually shown this a while before because he showed that there are good responses of both kinds of T cells against multiple proteins of the virus. And so I've talked about that before, and I want to talk about the new stuff that he mentioned when he was giving this seminar. Now, if you have an hour, I encourage you to go ahead and listen to him because you're going to get better and more detail from him than you will from me. Here's where you find it on YouTube, and this is the title of it. And also I'm going to show you the papers that he presented for this. But we have our 2 questions. Why do older people get so much sicker? And will our young people be protected into the future from their T-cell responses that they develop right now? So this has been a mystery from the very beginning. I remember when this first came out in South Korea, and I was watching the data very carefully to see who was getting sick, and I was so scared that kids would get sick from this like they do from the regular flu. But then I noticed as the data came in, it was devastating for older ages, but for the kids it mostly left them alone. Not completely, it's still a bad disease, don't get me wrong on this. But as far as a relative scale, it's about 100 times worse for the older people than for the younger. Why does that happen? So here we have a November 2020 Cell paper that Dr. Crotty and colleagues have talked about the reasons why, and these are the exact highlights from it. So I'll sort of translate these. Basically, you mount good immune responses of all branches to COVID-19, and they have to be coordinated. Notice in the second point, multiple coordinated arms of adaptive immunity. It's not just about the antibodies, it's also about the T cells, and there's even 2 kinds of T cells beyond the antibodies. At the bottom right there, aging and scarcity of naive T cells may be linked to risk factors for severe COVID-19. It may be about the T cells after all, and about coordination. So I'm not going to actually show you the data. The data's in the paper, he talks about the data, but I'm going to summarize it graphically, the way that Dr. Crotty has summarized it. And so you remember that you hear a lot about antibodies, and that's like hearing a lot about our military by just talking about the Air Force. It's very important. The Air Force is very important. I'm glad they're there. But there's also other branches of the Army, of the military, that is involved as well that you should talk about if you want to talk about the military that defends our nation, right? So the Air Force is like the antibodies, and there's 2 kinds of T cells. The Army being like killer T cells is a metaphor that I've used before, but I've never thought about it this way, that the helper T cells are more like the Navy. And that actually works for a number of levels. We can get into the philosophy of which branch goes with which kind of cell. But the main thing is there are 3 main branches. Antibodies are only one of them. In fact, there's even more than this. These are the branches of adaptive immunity. You also have innate immunity systems, which might be like the Marines. And I've studied natural killer cell proteins as well. And so I want to throw this in. I don't know who's the Coast Guard. I don't know any of this stuff beyond this. But I do want to say there are three branches of adaptive immunity that have to work together. And if they're all talking to each other and working together, you have a very good chance of overcoming viral infection, at least without a hospital stay. Again, we're not talking about infection at all. We are talking about the kind of life-threatening infection that is our primary concern right here. So, the other thing that I should mention about this virus is a reason why the natural killer cells aren't shown here is that this virus is very good at evading the innate immunity. So it's very good at getting past the Marines. It's very good at getting past the security systems that we have to serve as our first line of defense. But we have three other lines of defense, and they all can respond. And then when they work together, it's very bad news for the virus, good news for us. But the thing about older immune systems, it works with your physical body. It isn't working together the way it should be. And your immune system as well is not as nimble as it used to be. Believe me, I'm 47 right now, so I'm feeling it a little bit, and I know that it just continues. It's part of a fact of life of getting older. Okay, so and you notice that in this graphic, you have the three working together on the left for the younger ages, but on the right for the older ages, you have some of them not working together. If one of the branches isn't working as well as it should, and if you're older, probably one of them at least is not working as well as it should, that's where SARS-CoV-2 can actually get around the defenses and start to wreak havoc and even cause like a sort of interleukin feedback loop that causes an overreaction of the immune system, which is really bad news for you. So, one of the branches of the immune system that is part of this is because you have naive T cells that you produce. When you're a child, you think like a child, you act like a child. You make T cells like a child that are as naive as you are. But naive T cells are a good thing because they can learn. Naive T cells are plastic, they're ready to see new things, and they're ready to learn how to attack new viruses. And so they're very quick, and in a couple of days they figure out how to go after the virus, and then you're protected. That's good news for people 40 and under. For people 40 and over, you look in this graph right here, you have the thymus stops making those naive T cells. It drops from 80% to 10%. That's a huge drop-off. And that is probably the primary cause of your immune system just not being able to be as coordinated or as fast as it used to be. Most normal immune systems can handle this virus, but not everyone has a normal immune system, and some people are immunosuppressed. You should know if you're in that category, and if you are in the category of over 40, that's where you start to have to be thinking about augmenting your response to this virus any way you can. This is from another paper that Dr. Crotty's lab put out. This talks about the three branches of the immune system from top to bottom, and you can see that they're comparing a lower dose of the mRNA vaccine to 4 different scenarios, and they're saying, is this good or bad in this? And the good news is, for example, their lower dose seems to work about as well to make all 3 branches of the immune system as natural immunity, natural infection does. By the way, this is another hobby horse that I've gotten on, but natural immunity is about the same as vaccination. Don't listen to the people who are pulling you one way or another. It's about the same. And that's what the bulk of the data goes to. Don't cherry pick the data that says it's much better or much worse. And I think that this should affect all the ways we talk about the virus. But anyways, here it is right there. You can see the equal signs, and that backs up what I've been saying on that account. The full dose is better at making antibodies, and it's better at making the T helper cells, the Navy. The Army is about the same. And for age means that means that you make less antibodies. See that down arrow in the purple. The Army and the Navy, though, are about the same. The T cells are about the same when you get older. The good news is your immune memory, when it comes to the T cells, is actually still pretty good for older people. And the other thing that I've talked about before, that we've done some little projects about pre-existing T cells and how previous coronavirus infections that you've had as common colds might be able to train your immune system to recognize SARS-CoV-2. And again, Dr. Crotty's lab was the first one to show me the data that said this, and here he is a year and a half later still putting out data that says that yes, pre-existing T cells can help you make more antibodies and help you make more of the Navy T helper cells. And you're about the same when it comes to the Army, though. All this is to say, this goes along with what I've been seeing, and I've been looking carefully at the data for a long time to try to come up with what are the answers to these questions. Here's one I just have to tell you about. Just came out. This is not from Dr. Crotty's lab, but there's a bunch of other people. You can look down on it, and you can see that these people have looked into why is it that some healthcare workers never show any sign of either infection or even seropositivity, which means antibodies, in either infection or antibodies, and yet they never get sick. Well, it's because there is a possibility for your immune system to stop SARS-CoV-2 infection before it even makes enough of itself to make RNA copies, before it even has enough to make your system make more antibodies against it. Your system is like doesn't even see them as a problem because they get pushed out before they even have a chance to trip the alarms. They found out exactly what kind of T cells to what kind of protein. It's one of the interior proteins of SARS-CoV-2, not the spike protein. And they've seen how this works. And also, by the way, the T cells were trained on common cold coronavirus cross-reactive T cells is what leads to this. So cross-reactivity is showing up here. I'm so excited about this paper, but I've got other questions to answer, and I don't want to waste your time anymore. So this is the answer to question number 2. The coordination declines, and the naive T cells in particular decline with increasing age. Now, children have more naive T cells, and they also have more coordination, so they can quickly coordinate their response to the virus, and it can outrun the virus 5, 6, 7 days. They clear it from their system. So that's one of the reasons why children are more asymptomatic, but also why they transmit less. Because they can catch it, they can even get sick, but they're less likely to. And this really does affect children less, and we should be making policies based on this knowledge. So now a question that people have asked me, should I get a booster? And my question is, how old are you? Because you see this drop-off. If you're above 40, maybe you can consider getting a booster. But realize that the boosters are probably going to improve one branch of your immune system, when all 3 branches are what you really need, and all the 2 branches are probably good enough as they are already. So it's not a bad thing. I don't think it's any more dangerous than a typical flu shot. I haven't seen any signs of the adverse effects in looking at the data, or the many different ways I can look at the data. And I've concluded that this vaccine is safe. Boosters are safe. It's just a question of, do we really need them? So I recommend them for 65 plus. And I think that the recommendations that have come out about that are good ones. I know that certain states right now are allowing anyone to get them, and I'm not going to get one myself. But you feel free to get one if you want one. If you want a few more planes in your Air Force, be my guest. I think it's a good thing. And so I think that and you might get a bit more protection against infection. I think you'll be just as protected against severe disease, but even just regular non-severe COVID is pretty bad. And so I'm thinking about getting a booster just because of that. But it's not keeping me up at nights. And so basically this is my take on it. Mild positivity, But that leads to the next question, though. If these children have such a fast immune system, and if they are affected so much less by the virus, is it possible that the virus, they clear it so quickly that they don't really develop memory against it? In other words, the question is, will kids remember this virus when they encounter it again in 5, 10, 15 years? This is what's called a generational disease. It means that it affects a particular generation, in this case the older generation, but it won't affect the younger generation, not now, and not 5, 10 years in the future. And this is what Dr. Crotty directly addressed and was asked. You can listen to it yourself at 53 minutes, and I copied down the exact transcription here. He was talking about how in kids there's less lag time for the immune system to respond after infection, so less lag time is a good thing. And then the coordinator, another immunologist, asked Crotty, do you think that this is a disease that the kids are exposed now? They will be protected for life. Will the kids in the future be protected? And Crotty's answer right away was, yeah, I do. I think that. This is so different from some of the stuff that you get on Twitter or social media. And Crotty's not on social media that much. He's got work in the lab to do. And so that's why I want to highlight this for you, because I want you to know that he said this. I think our data on immunological memory, in adults, it looks like people on average make good immunological memory. And my guess would be that kids make even better immunological memory. Point out that it is a guess. It has not been studied, but this is the world's expert on T-cell memory in adults. And he's looked at kids, and he's seen even stronger signs that they have the memory. So yeah, this might be a 95% probability statement, but I'm comfortable making that kind of statement. He sees very robust T-cell repertoires in adults, robust adaptive immune responses in adults, likely in kids to make better memory to the vaccines than the adults. And yeah, I think it is going to be a generational disease, that the kids will be, in some sense, protected for life. Here's the exact quote from it. So if you want to go to this point right here, and you think you want to see Crotty saying exactly this, there he is. It's public. Hopefully I don't get in trouble with him by highlighting this, but this is what's on public on YouTube, and it's also where all the data has been pointing. Now I have to definitely make sure that I'm not selectively editing this. He does point out it's a virus that surprised us before. And so yeah, this could be a virus that evolves in a way that avoids the antigenicity in some way. And I have to point out that Trevor Bedford, in this talk right here, which is also another great talk that you should listen to, but I've summarized this in other places, he is more worried about antigenic evasion, and he's observed that the SARS-CoV-2 virus has sort of kicked it into high gear when it comes to evolution in a way that surprised all of us. So it has surprised us before, just like Crotty said. But we don't see, neither Crotty nor I see a way for the virus to get so much more worse. And we aren't as worried about antigenic evasion, possibly because we're T-cell people and we focus on the T-cells, which are much harder to evade. But I don't see how the virus can evade the T-cells so much that it becomes a worse problem. It might putter along at low-level endemicity, and it might cause disease and be such a nasty virus that it could cause like bad flu seasons on top of regular flu seasons for years to come. But still, if you talked to us a year ago saying, well, we'd have bad flu seasons for the next 5 years, that's bad, but it's so much better than people were worried about. And so I hope that things will stay as flat as they are right now this winter, that there won't be a big spike. I think that's likely from my judgment, but I also didn't think the Delta wave would be as big as it was. But I also thought things would go down when they did after vaccination really became widespread in the spring. So some people are worried about Eastern Europe right now, and I just want to say I'm keeping an eye on it. I'm worried about it too. But I'm not as worried because I think it's more likely that Eastern Europe reflects our past experience with the virus, not our future going forward. It's not like they are 4 months ahead of us and whatever happens there happens here after 4 months. There's a lot of differences going on, and my best judgment is I'm hoping this winter will be flat. We'll see if I'm right. I'm putting this online, and we'll see. I've been wrong on some things, but I've been right on some things, and this is my best guess going forward. The long-term immunity, all these papers out of the Crotty lab and backed up by papers across the world, shows that the immune response to this virus is robust and involves multiple branches working together, and most people who don't have a problem with their immune system should be able to fight this off. It's going to be painful if you catch it. So don't catch it if you don't have to. Do everything you can to avoid it. But also realize that when we're talking about trade-offs, these trade-offs are real. And the young people really do have a real advantage in this. And the older people really are at more risk. So let's take a balanced view of the pluses and minuses of the risk. The vaccine has turned SARS-CoV-2 into what's like a very bad flu, a very bad flu, but it's not like a generational scourge. It's not like the Black Plague. It never really was, but it was like nothing we'd seen before, and it's gotten better is my main thing. So I hope this helps. I'm open to asking questions. Please, it's a question asked with respect and friendship is one that I will always be happy to answer. So thanks for listening. And if you're older, go ahead and get your booster. And if you have other questions, go ahead and try to, maybe I'll come up with another video in response to your own questions. All right. Have a good weekend, everyone.